to call to order the Siloam Springs Utility Commission October 30th, 2025 meeting. Now move on to roll call. Commissioner Hevner.
Here.
Commissioner Keck is here. Commissioner Galacia is not. Commissioner Carlos is absent, and Commissioner Whale. Here. All right, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. First up, we have the minutes for our regular meeting held on September 25th, 2025. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, that was a motion by Commissioner Hevner. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right. Those minutes are approved. All right, next up, we will move on to the approval of the special called meeting that was held on October 2nd, 2025. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, those are all approved. All right, we are ready for tonight's presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dave Nauman. I'm with 1898 & Co., which is a part of Burns & McDonnell. And similar to our last conversation, I'm joined by some specialists in the various disciplines that your utility operates. So water and sewer is Alex Craven. He's joining via Teams. Adam Young is here in person from our electric side with me tonight. And then Allison Acarius is also on Teams. So I want to start with a brief recap of where we left financial plans. It changed just a little bit for solid waste. And so we'll show you what each utility is proposing in terms of revenue increases, and then we'll talk about the recommendations for rate design. We will go through then kind of the individual rates for the individual utilities, but we'll get to the punchline first on what happens to residential bills. So this is a summary of the revenue increases, and what you'll notice for water, sewer, and electric, that each of those utilities is looking at a 4% per year adjustment in revenues. On the sanitation side, it's a larger increase initially, followed by 5.5% thereafter. We had higher recommended increases the last time we met, and that has been addressed and reduced, I'm thankful to say. We're assuming you will get 3 to 4% per year growth in your customers. We're funding about $47 million in capital improvements through your rates. These increases will get you to cash flow positive territory, but it does not get reserves as high as we'd like them to be. So I wouldn't characterize them as excessively rich by any means. I think it's a pretty lean proposal as it relates to revenue increases. Solid waste is probably, from a cash flow standpoint, the weakest of your utilities, and that's why it's got the larger increases. So with respect to rate design, I think it's helpful just to have an overview of how we're approaching that for each utility. So for water, sewer, and sanitation, we're maintaining your existing rate structure. And we'll show you that here in just a little bit. There's no changes to the way the pricing is set up, but there are changes in the pricing levels. So we'll walk through that together. On electric, we're recommending the consolidation of a couple of your classes that have pretty similar rates. They get nearly identical service. And then we have a recommendation on your heat rate too. So a little bit different on electric, but not a lot of change. And for each of these utilities, you provide outside city services, and the way those are priced is generally a multiplier against your inside city rates, and none of that is changing either. So this is the punchline. We had a similar chart in our last presentation. And what this tells you is by utility, with rates designed for each utility, the projected impact to your average residential user. And so you'll see in 2025 that total bill runs about $202. In 2026, following the 4% and the 20% for sanitation, you're at about $212, $213. It's about an $11 change per month, or about 5%. If we look out to 2030, you'll see the cumulative effect of the program of revenue increases that have been proposed. It averages, we're a little higher in the first year, we're lower in the subsequent years with the sanitation approach. It's about a 4 to 4.5% per year change in bills for your average residential user.
So I do have a question about that.
Yes.
What is on the slide? So is that the 2025 rate? And then you can see the following years, that's just what that will be on an average,
Correct.
correct? So it
Correct.
won't be additional on top of so it's not going to be 212 on top of this year.
That's how the bill adjusts with the recommended rate increases. So yes, it's an $11 increase per month in 2026 compared to 25. But that's the total bill per month. Right, so that's a $202 bill today on average. Next year it'll be $212. The next year it'll be $221. That's a good question. Any other questions about the information here? Okay. So we'll now walk through each of the utilities. The format of how we'll talk about each utility is fairly similar, and we'll start on the water side with just a review of your existing and your proposed rates. What you'll notice here are a series of usage blocks for your water utility. There's a minimum bill, so that first 1,000 gallons is a fixed price, and then for units of use per 1,000 gallons after that, that rate comes down depending on the overall level of use. We're not recommending a change to that approach. It's a structure that's worked well for your utility. We're simply adjusting rates going forward to generate the 4% per year revenue need. So no change in the way your rates are structured, but the prices do increase year to year following the financial plan. When we look at the bill impact, what we're providing here is really a series of 5 different types of users. So kind of a low user at the very first line and a relatively high residential user in that 5th line. And then you'll see the dollar change in monthly bills in lines 6 through 10, and then the percentage change. So the things I would point out to you here are that average user is on line 8. It's $1.51 per month for a water bill change. But what you'll see in the percentages at the very bottom here is everything is 4%. So all your rates have been changed at a 4% per year adjustment.
Do you have a printout of this? We were just noticing how tiny these are.
It
and
looks
it's
really small on
hard.
the
Yeah,
screen.
we can't see it, I
Okay.
don't think.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have a hard copy.
We can get that for you in just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, these will be hard in this format then. Do we want to pause and wait for that?
Sorry, I think we were all having a difficult time reading that.
I can see it on the screen here. There's one that's worse, and so I think it is good to get you hard copies.
Probably, I mean, you can talk through it and then.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. With the commercial and industrial on the water side, so these are your business accounts. And if you look at the very bottom of this page 2, what you'll see is that everyone is changing at 4% here. So that the approach to changing the water rates is what we would call across the board, meaning all of your user charges just went up according to the percent recommended in the financial plan. And that will be the case for sewer as well. So the impact to bills will be very uniform. It'll be very similar. Everybody will feel that 4%, and there won't be really any variety around that. This is a comparison of your current bill relative to other regional peers. So you can see that in the middle is the green bar for Siloam Springs. That $1.51 bill change pushes you a couple of bars to the right, but it's very little change in total bill, and you're relatively on par and still below average compared to the survey. On the sewer utility, similar structure. So just like your water utility, you've got a series of blocks. It starts with a minimum bill, and then the price per 1,000 gallons is shown below that, depending on your use. This is, again, what we would call a declining block rate structure. Similar to water, all of your rates here are changing in alignment with that 4% recommendation for the sewer utility as well. And so when we look at your bill impacts, what you're going to see is that all of your customers' bills will move the same way. It's a relatively straightforward way to adjust rates and easy to communicate. When we look at your sewer bill, for the sewer average user, average resident, it's $1.79 per month change. And again, at the very bottom of this, you can see it's 4% per year for all of the residential types. Commercial and industrial, similar outcome. So these types of customers will have higher levels of use than your residents, but again, we've just adjusted all the rates at the same level. So everyone will get a 4% change in their bill, residential as well as commercial and industrial. From a regional bill comparison standpoint, that 4% means that you'll be, again, relatively close to average here with respect to your regional peers. So the electric utility charts, we may want to come back to because there's a lot of detail on these. The one thing we'll take a moment talking about the rates of change, and then I think maybe we'll wait for the hard copies to come in. I can move forward to solid waste. But on the electric side, there's really two structure changes. One is on your electric heat rate. The proposal here really is to not take any new customers on that rate. The new customers would join and pay your standardized residential or commercial rates. And then by 2030, we'd recommend sunsetting that rate. The concept behind that rate design really doesn't apply anymore, and so that's a very common change we're seeing in the industry and would recommend that here. And then on the large power, small power, I mentioned we were recommending consolidating a class. These two customers have very similar rates, but the level of service that's received is nearly identical. And so we would recommend combining them. There's a little bit of a different rate change, and I can show you that, but it's not materially different. Some will go up a little more than the 4%, and some will actually come down just a little bit. But these are your electric rates. They vary by class, but the difficult chart is right here. So we'll come back to this here in a few minutes. This one's even harder. From an electric utility standpoint, again, that rate change on your residential bill will put you right in line with average. On the sanitation side, so there's less moving parts on your sanitation rates in a lot of respects. You don't have changes in volume and fixed fees and volumetric fees like you do in the other three utilities. Your residents typically pay that 96-gallon fee. And you can see here the proposed rates. This is one utility where we didn't change the rates exactly uniform. So that 20% change on the average revenue stream is a little less for the residents, and it's a little higher on the commercial and industrial and the transfer station. And I can show you from an impact to bills on the sanitation side, that change is, I think it equates to about 15% next year, but you can see it does put you a little above average, but in the context of all of your other utilities, it's the smallest bill, and so that's helpful in diffusing the impact to your ratepayer.
Can you go back to that previous slide?
I certainly can.
Thank you, yeah. I was wanting to look at all of the,
And the assumption with this is that we would continue to get rid of our trash the same way, at least for the next 5 years.
There's no change in service provided or proposed. And that's really, it's a good point to be made on this slide too, that relative to some of your peers, I think you're doing more for that average residential fee than some of the other utilities in the region. So you're, Batesville and Springdale, we got a couple of notes on the slide here, don't provide curbside recycling. And then there's others that don't provide yard waste or brush collection services. So that even though that fee on a 96-gallon basis is gonna look a little bit higher, it does come with some additional services that the others do not.
I was looking at the commercial rates. And
Yes.
those seem to be very large increases.
I'm sorry, I hit a button erratically.
Yeah.
Yeah, Allison, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you do a quick recap of the changes in the commercial and transfer station rates?
Sure, not at all. No problem at all. So for commercial, there's going to be a 22% increase, followed by annual 5.5% increases. And then we have slightly higher increases planned for the transfer station rates, and that's largely following the benchmarking that we completed. And so the city's current transfer station rates, particularly the minimum amount charged, are quite low compared to some of the benchmark cities. And so that allows for some additional room for those increases to help keep some of the residential rate increases lower.
So we had a total system-wide increase that first year of 20%. The residential fees are going up about 15. Those commercial rates are in the 22% range, and then the transfer station's a little higher than that.
A yearly 5% increase?
I'm sorry?
A 5% after that.
After the first one, it's 5.5%, correct?
I had a question on your next slide. Did you all look at the cost to benefit? We'll use Springdale, for example. They don't offer their curbside recycling. Have we looked at the cost of the services that are offered as opposed to recycling, for example, how much we sell it for, and if those balance out, or?
Yeah, Allison, did you hear that question?
No, I did not.
I'm sorry.
I'll rephrase it. Are we paying more to provide a service than we're actually getting out of what we're able to sell those recyclables for?
Allison, did you hear that?
Sorry, it's a little bit muffled.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's probably, I've got the laptop close to my chest. It's probably muffling the speaker. I think the question, one more time, please.
For our recycling pickup, are we paying more to collect it curbside than we're actually selling it for as a city?
I don't think that's the case, but did you hear the question, Allison?
I believe so. Sorry, it's a little bit quiet, but I think what you're asking for is the link between what you're selling the recycling commodities for versus what's being charged for the recycling.
Are you making money?
Yeah, are you making money or breaking even on those recycling fees?
Yeah, and currently the commodity rates for recycling, that's not at all being factored in the cost of service.
Why? Why
Yeah.
was that not factored in?
Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Allison?
Sure. So what we're really looking at in this analysis is the total cost of the collection. And so the recycling, processing, and whatever those commodities are being sold for, because the city does not own the MRF from which the recycling is being processed, we're not factoring that revenue into this cost of service analysis.
So it's specific to the revenues and costs that the city owns the process for? Is
They're
that?
not factoring in what's being made by the city.
Yes, that's correct.
So I would have thought that would have been important to factor in if we're looking at increases, because I know that those can change over year, but if we are making a profit, some of that should be able to offset some of these increases. So I'm just wondering why that wasn't factored in.
Is it fair to say, Allison, that, I mean, we're looking at total cost of service for the solid waste or sanitation services, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and really, from what I've seen in the department's budget, the recycling commodity revenue is not a large part. Also, recycling commodities, as you mentioned, can vary a lot. They can vary quite a bit month to month. And so I think it would be really hard to forecast what those commodity values would be moving forward. And so while we can assume that, there is going to be revenue coming in from recycling commodity sales, it would be really difficult to kind of assume how much would be coming in as revenue.
So maybe characterized differently, you are assuming that what's being experienced today will continue, but there could be volatility in that.
That's correct. It's also important to know when we're designing residential rates, most of the time we want to incentivize recycling collection. And so really we're almost charging no fee for recycling collection so that residents aren't, encouraged to not recycle. And so by grouping in recycling and trash and really focusing on the cost of trash, you're trying to further incentivize recycling as well.
So does this chart capture the cost of pickup for recycling and brush collection, as you've got notes to the side, even though there is a income basis off those between selling mulch and sending out the recycling? I just want to know if this is being captured in this graph or if that's separate.
It is being, the implications of those revenue streams are being captured in the graph, and they really are what influence the percentage increases that we talked about at the very beginning in the presentation with the 20 and the 5.5s. So to the extent there's a revenue stream happening, we're relying on that continuing going into the future. And then the rates are designed to reasonably recover costs and balance your commercial, industrial, transfer station, and residential rates.
If I may, the recycling that we collect, it's not a moneymaker, okay? What we make off that is relatively low. But what the goal is to avoid the tipping fees to the transfer station, okay? That's the main goal for us on the recycling side of it. What we can collect and make off of it is great. Diverting it from the landfill so we're not paying those disposal fees is even better, okay? So that's where we're at. That's what we're trying to do. Increase recycling so the tipping rates will stay low, okay? So as far as we do own our MRF, we do process everything ourselves, and we have our broker that we send everything out to. But as far as making money on the recycling, we do, but it's not enough to offset anything. It's basically a break even. So, but again, the less that we have to haul to landfill is where we're going to make our money back, okay? If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no problem.
I mean, is there an idea to add in an incentive for those people that, residents that, recycle?
So what you can do is called a pay-as-you-throw program, but that means we'd have to change the entire structure of the city's current sanitation.
Or residents could just receive a price break if they have a recycle bin that they fill?
So that's how a pay-as-you-throw program works. You have 3 different cart sizes, and the idea is to incentivize a smaller can so you can then recycle.
Is that what Batesville and Springdale do then, where it says they do not provide curbside recycling?
No, recycling costs money, okay? And it costs money to process, it costs money to pick up, it costs money, right? So most cities, some cities don't recycle because of the cost. We are lucky because Siloam's already set up, so we're not enduring these new costs. Now with these other cities, it's important to notice that they do not do fall and spring cleanups for the cities. They don't provide the brush pickup like they said. There's several things that the amenities is not captured on here that that rate actually takes care of, if that makes sense. So the $22 is covering the brush pickup, your recycling, the trash pickup, your fall and spring cleanups. That's all part of this one rate, where these other cities don't have these other things because they're privatized haulers. They're just picking up your trash.
I can see, though, where residents would be unhappy with a 20% increase whenever there's money being made off of recycling. I mean, I'm just being honest, you know what I mean? And that wasn't taken into consideration on this report.
Well, it kind of was, and one thing that we need to also mention on that, we do not charge recycling for businesses, okay? Most cities do charge cardboard recycling. City of Siloam doesn't. So we're giving a lot of breaks to a lot of people already that many wouldn't think about or understand. But most of the time, most cities will charge half of whatever your trash rate is for a cardboard dumpster. So if they're getting charged $200 a month for their 6-yard, they get charged $100 a month for their recycling as well. We don't charge that. So we actually collect the recycling for them for free, process it back, and then move forward.
And one point on the residential impact, so that the percentage increase overall for the sanitation utility is 20% in 2026, or proposed to be. The impact to that residential rate is about 15 or 15 and a half. So it is getting a lower increase relative to the non-residential users of your system.
And one thing to think about, commissioners, as well, is the landfill fees have gone up significantly over the last few years, and they're going to continue to go up significantly as the landfill gets smaller and smaller in size. So these fees are what is covering for us to be able to go and dump just to break even, is what we're trying to do.
I know you've discussed like the whole incinerator possibility. What is, I know that's way down, but what's the
Where are we at?
timeline? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So we are speaking with a company, and we're trying to work out a private-public partnership. And if that happens, then obviously things will be much easier, but it's a lot of money to start up, and this company is trying to get that going, and they want to come to Siloam Springs to do that, so. But that's still going to be a few years down the road.
Fees till 2030 would probably still be in place.
Yes, ma'am. And again, it's just, it's the landfill that's driving up a lot of the rates, unfortunately.
Let's go back to the electric utility. And actually, if it would be helpful, we can step through water and sewer again, now that you've got hard copies in front of you. Is that of interest, or would you just like to talk? You want to go back to the start? Okay. So let me start with the average bill impact. And I know we've talked a lot about the impact to that residential rate on the sanitation side in particular. You're talking about $3 a month. So the percentages can feel significant. They are higher than what we're seeing for the other utilities, but the dollar impact is perhaps a little easier to relate to. Overall, you've got about an $11 per month change proposed with the rate design that we've done across all 4 utilities for that average residential user. And so again, for the water utility, it's a minimum bill, a declining block rate, which means the more that you're using, the lower the unit price. From a bill impact perspective, so for water and sewer, we're raising all of your user charges across the board. Everything goes up 4%. So what you'll see in this residential chart are different levels of users. So a small user would have about a 61-cent change in their bill on row 6. An average user on row 8 is the $1.51 that I had mentioned earlier. But every change here on a bill equates to a 4% adjustment. And then on the commercial and industrial side, you've got larger users here, so overall the bills are higher. But the impact to those bills, again, remains a consistent 4% based on the rate design that we've proposed. And then from an average bill standpoint relative to your peers, on the water utility, you're below average, which is about $44 a month. On the sewer utility, similar rate structure with a minimum bill and then declining blocks thereafter. And again, it is also approached similar to the water utility. We're raising all of these rates 4%. So when you look at the bill impact, every one of your customers will feel the same percentage change. And the following two charts will help illustrate that. So again, the residential user in 2026 is about $1.79 per month change, 4%. If you're a low user, it'll be less than $1, and then a larger user will see a higher change, but it is 4% across all the different user types. And that's true on the residential side of your customers as well as the commercial and industrial. So again, larger bills on the commercial and industrial users, but on a percent change basis, everyone is uniform. It's 4%. And from a regional comparison, that sewer bill for that average residential user is again right in line with average after the 2026 change. On the electric utility, we talked about two structural changes. So one is the elimination or what we would call a freezing of your electric heat rate. That rate essentially would not be available to new customers. Your existing customers would stay on it. And then at 2030, we'd recommend that rate get phased out. And then all those customers would be on the standard residential and commercial rates. Any new customers with this proposal, residential or commercial, would also pay the standard residential or commercial rate at the point at which they joined. And then on the class consolidation, that large power and small power class have slightly different pricing. There's really no difference in level of service. And so that's proposed to combine. So you'd have a single class there. And that changes the bills just a little bit, and you'll see that in the next two slides. So the first slide here is the electric rates themselves. So you can see proposed 26 through 30 and your existing rates. And these fees include both a fixed charge or customer charge along with an energy rate per kilowatt hour.
Do you have averages on those? An average bill for small and average bill for large?
Yeah, okay. So we have two slides on the bill impacts. And so what you'll see here is residential on the top box, commercial on the bottom. The middle bill there, I think, is the average. So, and it's bolded, although it's a little hard to see in the slide. So line 4, resident, that's your average residential bill today is at $97.58. And you'll see it gets a 4% rate increase across all 4 years, 5 years. And there's a little bit of variation, although it's relatively minor, between a smaller user and a larger user on a percentage basis. But your residents are going to see about a $4 a month change on average in 2026. On the commercial rates, again, line 11 would be your average, and then you can see some dispersion around that to give you an idea of the larger and smaller customer impact. And again, it's 4% for that average, a little higher for the low end, and slightly lower than 4% on the high end.
Was there a reason to merge the small and large rates?
You want to?
Yeah, I think Dave mentioned this before, but the small power and large power customer classes are physically identical. They both receive at a secondary voltage. They're all demand metered as well, and almost predominantly 3-phase service. So physically, they're the same thing, and the rates are very similar today. So when you look at the typical bill impacts, we merged the two classes in that first year. In 26, you can see actually the small power customers, actually almost all of them see a benefit, and we have to increase the large power. In just the first year, their average bills go up by 5% instead of 4%. But then every year after that, everybody is getting a 4% increase. So what you do, the reason you would do this is, one, the rate structure in the small power class has a declining block rate because it doesn't And the problem with that is it doesn't get cheaper the more you use with electricity. And two, what happens sometimes when you have so many classes that are the exact same service, you get customers bouncing back and forth between classes, and you want to mitigate that as well.
Thank you.
So that's electric, and then and again, on an average price per kilowatt hour basis against regional peers, you're about average with the proposed 2026 change. And then we've talked about sanitation. So what I would propose, unless you'd like to go through these two slides again, is come back to the punchline, which is that customer impact. So the summary here at the very end just covers that bill impact, and we've already talked about it as well. This is page 26. It follows the sanitation. So average resident, $11 a month roughly in 2026 impact. It equates to about 5.2% change. That's a combination of 4% increases in 3 utilities and a higher percentage increase on sanitation. If we look across all 5 years, it's about a 4% average because that first year is a little higher and it's 4% thereafter for 3 of them and 5.5% for sanitation. And the real crux of implementing these changes, it's been a number of years since you've adjusted rates, and we know that there's a financial deficiency in the cash flows, and there's an issue being able to implement necessary improvements, and so these increases will address those concerns. So I feel like we've kind of started and then stopped and came back to the presentation in the middle. We have some recommendations for moving forward, but before I get to those, are there any other questions you have? I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we're proposing and what that impact will be to different customers in your system.
It'll definitely be more of an impact, I think, to commercial, it seems like, than, like, we have this impact to the average residential bill, but the commercial's going to be pretty, like.
And that the impact at the commercial level will be, those will be higher bills, right, for almost all 4 of your utilities. But there's 4% change for water and sewer. So again, from an overall standpoint, yeah, it'll be higher on sanitation. If you're in the large power side of your electric, it's ever so slightly higher than 4% change next year. But the overall rate of change is relatively small across all 4.
Do we have any idea, and this may not have anything to do with this, but how many businesses have left Siloam Springs within the last year versus how many new businesses have came into town? No. And that wasn't considered on the growth as far as commercial growth or anything like that for the city? Was that a part of it as far as like where you've looked at past years and the historical business growth moving forward versus the attrition?
Right. So we have records of the counts of different types of customers for maybe 3 years of history. And then going forward, we've got some growth projections that come out of different master planning exercises you've got underway and what's anticipated. And so that 3% per year growth rate is what's being used for water, sewer, and electric, and that would be a net 3%. So anybody leaving and others coming, you'd be net higher, 3% per year going forward. On sanitation, it was a little higher, so it was around 4% growth in sanitation. And I think, and Allison, keep me honest, Allison has dropped. I believe Allison, I believe on the sanitation side, there's been some evidence of higher growth rates. And so we were a little more aggressive in anticipating future growth there. The trade-off is if we rely too much on growth and it doesn't happen, then you've got revenue to make up from your other customers in future periods. So we try to be a little tempered in the way we expect growth to occur because we don't want to rely on it so much that if it doesn't occur, it puts your utilities in a bind in future years. So think about it this way, perhaps if for every % you get in growth, it can offset about 1% of revenue. So there's opportunity there if you grow more than 3% per year, that you'll end up in a little better position financially than what this forecast would represent. But I will also add to that, we don't have reserves where we'd recommend them either. So anything that comes in within reason in that forecast that's maybe a little better than we anticipated will just help your utilities be in a more sustainable position at the end of this 5-year period.
So I know we've talked about it internally as a group, but did this study include any consideration into cost reduction or alternative income streams as opposed to rate increases?
We look at the status quo today, and then if we have any known changes, particularly as it relates to operations, sometimes there can be adjustments in the forecast going forward. But in this case, it's assumed relatively stable. So 4% per year operating cost inflation generally, to the extent, again, that you could wring some efficiencies out of something or stop doing something, and that would lower your cost, it will put your utilities in a better footing in future years. We really would recommend having a 90-day reserve across all 4 utilities, and we don't get there in this plan. You will be covering your reserves and the commitment to them as a city, and especially in the general fund side. But on your utilities, it is not what I would call a very strong financial result at the end. It's much better than where you're at today because it stops the bleeding that you have happening in your revenues. But it doesn't put you as far along as we would like. And that is really a decision that was made to try and keep these increases as palatable as they can be. But if you have opportunity to make things better, it will just put your utilities in a better footing.
Oh, I'm guessing that's a no.
No, we assume general inflation over today's cost is the short answer.
Dave, one of the things you mentioned alternative revenue streams, I think I heard. We have other revenues, non-rate revenues that we build into the forecast, like fees and I don't know what there is on the pole attachment fees or whatever, but not the core services. We build those in and assume those are constant, maybe a slight growth on some, but pretty benign. So we're not expecting some other windfall of cash to come in that's going to offset the need to increase rates.
Has there been a thought to bring this to the residents for a vote before it goes to the board for a recommendation, or is it just?
Actually, that was part of the reason why the commission was put together, so that people who are citizens would have an opportunity to comment on the rate study prior to the board making a decision.
They'll have time before now and Tuesday, or
Well, they have several readings before something is actually passed. So I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion.
Does anyone have any other questions?
it just has us like, I'm just looking at like Siloam, City of North Little Rock, Bentonville, on the residential rate for the proposed electric. We're ahead of Fayetteville, higher than Fayetteville on that, so I'm just.
Keep in mind that the blue bars that you see are rates that are in effect today. And so we know, and I can speak to water and sewer nationally, we know rates are going up about 5% per year. And so I would expect that some of your regional peers will also be adjusting rates up. So as you get into next year, I think you'll find that they won't all be exactly as they're shown today, that there will be some that will be higher.
Well, I think everybody understands it's going up. I mean, that's just a for sure thing that it is going to go up. It's just how we handle and how much to.
Through the study that you put together, because you have a lot of other cities involved here, did you have any takeaways from what other cities are doing that could help benefit Siloam and how we manage our utilities?
Now that-
Bella Vista's water is really cheap, it looks like. How do they do that?
There's a lot of reasons why bills can vary community to community. And I can tell you for water and sewer in particular, if you've got a lot of growth, or if you've got a relatively young system, or if you've used debt to help finance your capital projects, that those are strategies that can help make today's ratepayers' bills lower. So growth can mask a lot of things. And if you're in a really high growth community, that does help make things look more affordable in a lot of respects. Some communities, you mentioned the prospect of maybe alternate revenue streams. And as Adam was saying, if there's a revenue stream that's in place today, we forecasted it to continue. Some communities might consider an impact fee as a way to offset the cost of growth. And so that would be something to think about as you move forward into the future. That has its own complexities, and there's pros and cons to that too. But it is, if you don't have an impact fee, ultimately the cost of infrastructure and having capacity available is coming from your existing ratepayers. A lot of communities will approach it that way, but we do know in Arkansas there are some that have impact fees as well, and that can be a mechanism that can help offset rising costs.
So if I'm to understand this correctly, this is so that the utilities can work for paying for themselves and to be self-supporting and to not have to borrow from the general fund and then make payments back to the general fund for the money that they have borrowed in the past.
Yes, that's the
So
case.
that just pretty much sums it up, right?
That will be phased in over time to help address those things. That payback is happening over 5 years. The sanitation utility is going to need a little bit of help the next couple of years, but it will get better. So that's the goal, self-sufficiency.
I think the biggest thing that people are going to question is, why is the city in this position? Why do they owe the money? Why is it up to them to pay the money if we have it in a fund instead of using some of it from a fund? And then people do see the growth going around and they're like, well, we do have more people. We have, more businesses coming in. So why isn't this helping offset costs?
Well, new ratepayers will help offset costs. So even if it's set impact fees aside for just a moment, the more users you have on your system, the more you're spreading the cost of that system over a larger pool of customers. And most utility costs are relatively fixed. So you get more efficient the more that you grow until you get to the point that you have to invest in that next increment of capacity. So the growth is a good thing, and like I mentioned, it will help keep your costs lower because of that leverage you get out of efficient operations. The key, I think, for a go-forward strategy for your utilities is I'd highly recommend not staying idle on rates. So part of the issue that you're encountering now is there was about a 4-year window where rates didn't go up, and it happened to coincide with 40-year highs on inflation. And so that's a tough combination that even if you're doing small nominal increases will help you chip away. So we would really recommend kind of getting on a program of regular revenue adjustments. And the unfortunate thing is for most utilities it's a perpetual exercise. Costs will always go up.
You ever get to a point, though, like in a year or two, to where you, I mean, because this is a 5-year plan, is it going to go for 5 years for sure? There's going to be a 4% increase? Or do you get to 2 or 3 years and you're like, hey, we've caught up, we've got enough in the, yes, we know we still need to have a little bit of increase every year, but is there any chance it could maybe decrease, I guess? Or, I mean, that's,
That would be up to the board. I'm guessing this is a money-making way. This is a way for money to be made off of the utilities to get them back into the, I'm going to say into the good, right? Instead of
Repay.
into the negative where th're currently at.
Yeah, I would characterize it just a little differently. It's not a money-making proposition as much as it is, we're going to stop your bleeding
Catching up.
and minimize the need to rely on your general fund for support in financing things. And so it does get you to self-sustaining positions in all 4 utilities, but it will take the full 5 years. If you find that circumstances have improved, you can always have a discussion around what to do with rates at that point. But getting on a program is a smart strategy to help stabilize where you're at.
so what if they do approve the incinerator, and then I know they have a whole big sewer thing that they're having to do, and is all of that going to be paid through this increase also, or will there be additional increases? I know that's kind of a what if,
I
but
can
is-
tell you that the sewer items are included in these rates. And they're actually included in these rates, not even in the user fees, but as the 5/8 cents sales tax. As it goes, as it can completely repays the debt for the water treatment plant. You know, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to ask for it to pay for a lot of the sewer increases. So if we did not do that, then that would also be included in the rates. So that was probably around $30 million that's not in the rates.
Okay, that's what I wondered, if it was part of this then would be, or if there'll be more later to come, or anticipation.
With, again, with the incinerator, that's a private company that is looking at that, and it's a different kind of waste to energy that they're looking at doing. They're a very young company, so I've not let a lot out on that because I don't want to set something up that's not
Going to
potentially
happen, right? Mhm.
But there is some grant opportunities that we're looking at for some of the stuff that we're wanting to do. So we're not looking at anything coming out for those things currently. So,
I would also say that there is also a limit. We are statutorily limited to how much debt we can incur. So trust me, we are not going to ask the citizens to build a $300 million facility. It cannot happen legally.
So what you're needing is just approval to take it to the board for them to discuss it on Tuesday?
Correct. We want to make sure that you're in support of that, and then we'll have a conversation with your board intended on Tuesday, yeah.
I had one question on the capital improvement fund. It says that about 47 million would be generated for necessary capital improvements. That's just what's planned on the 5 years that we know is needed over the next 5 years to keep system improvements, upgrades.
I just
That's
got
the
to the
part,
slide you're
that's the
talking
part that citizens don't always see, is all the upgrades and the equipment and the maintenance and the stuff they just see. Oh, you're giving me some electric and I'm paying you a lot of money, you know, so.
I mean, I can give you an example, Ms. Evener. If you were to look at what a trash truck cost 10 years ago versus what it is now, it's $150,000 more per truck. So everything has just went up, and we have just eaten those
Sure,
costs
yeah.
over the years. So,
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I understand, and I know that we haven't had an increase for several years, and everyone knows it's coming. It had to. You can't just keep it like it was. So I agree that it should have been minimally increased probably each year in the past 4 years. It would be a lot easier to swallow than this, but I don't want to be the one to tell people that.
All right, so I guess are there any other questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this point in time, does anyone have a motion Would they like to make a motion to send this before the board the way it is written?
I'll make a motion for the board, for this to go to the board as written for them to discuss at their next meeting.
Second.
All right, so we have two. We'll take a vote. Commissioner Heavener,
Yes.
Commissioner Whale,
Yes.
and unfortunately, the way that this is written with this increased structure, I will have to vote no. Is there anything else that we need to do before we adjourn?
I actually would be curious, part of this process is getting your guidance and feedback. So if you're not comfortable with it, the way it is written, can I ask what it is that you're looking for to see done differently? And I don't know if it's feasible,
For
but
sure. So some of the things that I'm uncomfortable with is, number one, the percentage of increases. I think definitely with the sewer, water increases, the commercial rates versus the residential rates. I just think that that is could be potentially a deterrent to businesses coming into town. I know that I saw one business that closed just this week, and they mentioned utilities and rent. So as a regular resident, as you've reminded us that we are, my concern is that people are going to have to choose between paying medical bills, paying their rent, and then paying their utilities, and that this could be a sizable increase. I think that if it was a smaller percentage, that would be a little bit easier, and also if it wasn't a 5-year plan. If it was maybe a 2-year plan with a smaller increase. But that's my feeling about being uncomfortable voting yes for this. So I don't know what Commissioner Heavener or Whale, what they may see in their respected fields. I know she's a realtor. I think that could impact whether people want to move to a town, the rates and rate changes. And I also feel like it's already been advertised that increases are coming. So I don't really even know if, I felt like that advertisement when that came out, it felt like our role, or at least my role, was mitigated. So whatever my thoughts were, or the thoughts of my fellow commissioners, might not be taken into consideration since that press release had already went out that the rates were going to increase. So, I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks, but that's my personal opinion.
so it's not about how the rates are structured. It's just the fact that that is the amount that would be required to cover the capital improvements.
I think it's how the rates are structured. Yeah.
So you think that, again, just trying to get information, are you wanting, because if we have to get to 4%, are you wanting to see that 4% less on businesses and more on residential?
No, I don't know where the 4% came from, especially whenever revenue, potential revenue that we have has not been taken into consideration. And I know that they said it was taken into consideration, but there wasn't a slide or a percentage in that showing year over year the increase. I know we purchased 2 balers last year, so I know that was an increase, an increase of an expenditure, but also an increase of production and output. So, you know.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm, again, trying to address what you're looking for. So what you would like to see is some of the numbers behind the resulting study.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why 4% was the settled on increase year over year, and 20% was the settled on increase for at least the first year for an area where I feel like we have some revenue.
I think that, like she's saying, I think it's the amount that you're saying we need to get to catch up, to stop the bleeding, is where I think some of the percentages and numbers came from. But maybe just to see that amount and what led to that, and then to get to that, this is what we need to do this year and this year and this year and this year, which came out to the 4% each year, I think.
We have some slides in the first presentation we had with you about a month ago where we looked at the cash commitments relative to the revenue stream and the gap that we saw there. But we have got detailed tables that sit behind those that can show you how things are trending over time. And I know the 4% that are consistent across 3 utilities may feel a little arbitrary, and it's not. It is a function of trying to align your revenues with your expenses and the capital funding needs. As Christina mentioned on the sewer utility, we are hoping that some sales tax revenue can end up being a funding source there, because without that, we can't do everything that's in the capital plan on the sewer side. So it's not a matter of convenience or simplicity that they're all at 4%. It's just kind of how the numbers fell out. All of them are relatively weak in terms of reserves. And so there's nothing over-recovered here, and your utilities are in a weak position today. So and sanitation happened to be the weakest. And so that's why that one has more of an increase early. But we can give you the detailed tables that'll demonstrate that.
I think that helps people just to see, and I do remember that you showed us a little bit of why it was going to this number to catch up, basically, from where we've been so behind, but it doesn't look bad, like on a residential, it's not as terrible. You look at $11 a month, and I mean, that is hard for some people, but on that average, that doesn't seem so terrible, but the commercial side, I mean, I know they make more money, but 4% on a larger amount is a lot more money, so it just seems to get infrastructure to come in and stuff, that's what I think is important to look at, is what they're paying. And I do know the city works with businesses to give them some
Incentives?
Yes, some different incentives, so.
Well, and just thinking about the average person's increase year over year as far as their income, I mean, most regular people's income is not going to increase 4% each year or year over year. So that's also something to take into consideration, I think.
This is an important point, and we kind of comes back to this on the 4%. That's just over the next 5 years, but keep in mind over the last 4 to 5 years, it's been 0. So when we think about this 4% over 5 years, it's really like 2% over 10 years is really what we're talking about here, because we've done nothing over the last 5. So we're really keeping it pretty low, factoring in, like I think you said, the highest inflation in the last 40 years over the last 3. So that's why the costs have gone up so much faster than revenue, which is why you've had to borrow a lot. And I'm speaking from the electric utility. There's a lot of money to be repaid back to the city, plus just to cover.
Exactly, though, what you
OpEx.
said, like the highest inflation increase in the last however many years. Everyone feels that in their own pocketbook. So asking for the highest increase that we've had in the last 5 years for a overall utility increase is, as Kemi said, a big pill to swallow right up front.
On sanitation, it sounds like sanitation.
On all of it, yeah. I mean, it's just, that's the largest we've went from no increase to a 4% increase. That's what you're asking for. So that's what I'm saying, like, that's a big thing to ask. It's a big ask all at once instead of it being a stepped increase, you know, maybe 1.5%, then up to a 3, you know what I mean, over a period of time that might be a little bit more, I don't know, feasible in some areas for some people. That's just my comments and concerns because they've been asked for.
I appreciate that. I have had clients that would prefer and have elected to do kind of that stepped increase. And in the instances where I've seen that put into play, where it gets higher over time, it creates a lot of rate fatigue because it keeps getting higher and higher. And so there's pros and cons, right? You're right, it's been no increase and now we're going to 4, and so that feels sudden. But you could do a 1.5 or a 2, but the increases at the tail end would be much higher than you would like in order to end up in the same spot. So that's the challenge, because that revenue compounds over time, and that's part of what makes those 4% work.
Maybe the city could even do some things on, I mean, this is just saying that, helping like giving them ideas of how to cut back on utilities or how to save here and there, or like, you know, because I think there's a lot of wasted stuff too, or people don't know, don't run this after this time, or this is the most expensive time to wash your clothes, or, you know, different things like that. And I don't know if they ever do anything like scholarships or if people ever pay in extra and can cover, you know, maybe something like that we could look at later down the road or something.
I did want to address one thing that you brought up, Bernadette. When it comes to the revenue made off the recycling, what we have to remember now is it's a new day with tariffs, okay? And it's a new day with what we're getting for the amount of money for our recycled material. For an example, our PET, which is your #1 plastic bottles, I'm now getting a penny a pound. And it takes a lot of plastic bottles to even make a pound.
Save those pennies, they don't make them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So things like that is there's not a large revenue for recycled material. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that. Our best revenue is OCC, which is cardboard, and we do not charge for cardboard at all. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that is kind of where we're at. And the markets are very volatile when it comes with the brokers right now. We're getting the best prices of anybody in the region. We're getting premium plus 20, which is unbelievable. But even at those rates, we're still way lower than what we were last year with the markets. So as much as we're trying to push it and pull and keep going and make these revenues, they're much smaller now than what they were a year ago.
I think most people are really thankful for recycling too.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's something I think most people would want to have,
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
But I can see that there would be no incentive to recycle if that wasn't taken into consideration with the rate increases.
Absolutely, you're right. It's just one of those that we have increased recycling dramatically in Siloam Springs. So it looks like we have done so much more, and we have, but the more that we can continue the recycling, and the more that we can do what we're doing now with the businesses and offering them free recycling, free cardboard pickup. I mean, the loaded cost of having somebody pick up a dumpster in a $400,000 truck and a $1,000 dumpster, and you know the employee itself, it starts to add up. So when we look at these rates, especially on the utility part of it or on the commercial side of it, we have to look at how many times those are getting picked up per week. So if you have a 4-yard going twice a week and they're charged $200 a month, that's twice a week that a guy's going out there with that truck, picking it up, dumping it, taking it back to the shop. That $200 is for a month, 2 times a week, somebody going out there and picking that up. So when you break it down per pickup, it's not near as much. So when you look at your rates and you're looking at line by line, that's something that I would ask you to consider as well. It may look high, but if you think about what it takes to pick that up and process, it's really not that high. We still have to pay the $40 a ton at the landfill for each one of when we take it, plus the transport, plus the pickups and that. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood.
Landfills are filling up, so they're charging a ton more too.
Yeah, and we're under contract, but even under the contract, we still have CPI, we have extensions, we have things that we get hit with that we've not passed on. So Josh unfortunately got hit really hard with waste management, and I got hit much lower than Josh, but it's still every year. We got one this last year with a CPI increase that we just had to eat, and they have done the CPI increases, and we've not passed those along.
Quick question on the fall and spring cleanups. How much per event or per annual do those typically cost the city?
About $20,000 in spring, something like that, $25,000 in fall, or vice versa. I can't remember. It's somewhere in those. We ran the numbers. We've got all that, but it's somewhere around $20,000 a ton.
And was that going to be consolidated to one time a year?
I've not said anything about doing that. So
Okay.
the only thing that we've talked about is maybe doing a call-in, but nothing. Right now, everything's the same. We're not changing anything at the moment.
Say, it's one of those things that people really appreciate those things. They just don't realize.
There's a cost associated
Right.
with it.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. that's it. That's, call it, well, did you have anything
Any other
else?
questions yeah?
No, but I appreciate your feedback because that helps us give you the information that you're looking for. Thank you.
I'll need a motion to adjourn. Anyone want to make that?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second? All right. Motion to adjourn at 6:39.